Schumacher has finally been released on Netflix. Now, this was a highly anticipated F1 documentary or film, whichever way you want to look at it. Now, right from the outset, it should be important to note that this was made in cooperation with the Schumacher family. Now, the reason why that is so important right from the outset is obviously because of Michael's current situation, which we're also going to talk about, because obviously the documentary also kind of touched on it as well. Everything about Michael Schumacher, his brand, and everything that goes out in terms of the media is all controlled by his family, and rightly so. So this has been made with cooperation with them, with some of their family footage, and of course covering his Formula One story as well. Now, the first hour and a half of this film, you were just there. You were right in the thick of things. The rise of Schumacher, him becoming world champion with Benetton, and then kind of the struggle years as well, and they didn't exactly, shy away from that. And again, certainly one of the big highlights for me, and there's no doubt about it, because I was very intrigued in terms of how are they going to approach the Schumacher controversies, because as equally as good of a driver as Michael was, he was not without his controversies, and that was arguably both his kind of power and also his weakness in a way as well. He was such a competitive animal, and I feel like the way the film kind of brings that across, that Schumacher was so focused at the time, he was almost, and I definitely feel this, he was almost ahead of his time as a driver, the way he was building the team around him. He wasn't even motivated at one point by titles, because he could have just stayed at Benetton and perhaps won the title also in 96 as well, but he didn't. He went to Ferrari because he wanted to do something different. Ferrari, for all of their might and for all of their history, they were not that great in the 90s, because there was so much, especially in the early 90s, I should say, despite the fact that they had Alain Prost racing for the team, it never quite came together, the cars were never good enough, and the organization at Maranello was just nowhere near the likes of Williams or McLaren. But then with Jean Todt, Ross Brawn, and of course Michael Schumacher, they built up this Goliath that started to dominate Formula One like we've never seen before. And again, some amazing pieces of footage that still sticks with me in the back of my mind, and that I really have taken away, of Michael and even Eddie Irvine as well, testing at night. And I think that just summarizes how hard they were working, how hard they were pushing. They weren't just going to the races and going through the motions and then going back to the factory and talking about it. They were pounding those cars day and night from morning till dusk. And I feel like that just encapsulates the hard work and dedication that Michael Schumacher had, and really, again, why he was a driver ahead of his time, in my opinion. And he was really, in a way, the first of the modern Formula One drivers in terms of what he did with his body, his health, how he was just so focused on just racing performance and extracting everything out of the car, out of the team, and also out of himself as well. All of that I thought was encapsulated so well, and the message, I feel like, was just amazing in terms of how hard he had to work, how he was focused, and also how it affected his family life as well, because a little bit unexpected actually from my side was the interview and also the commentary by his wife Karina as well, who did an amazing job, and it was definitely one of the highlights for me. And I thought there was just some great kind of behind the scenes of what Michael was like in his private life, because Michael was definitely one of those that was so focused on Formula One but was always very private about what happened outside of it. He needed that release, he needed that time away from Formula One, and it's something that drivers even talk about to this day, the fact that although they are 100% focused, their entire life revolves around Formula One, you do need that time off to just recharge and come back even stronger. So yeah, I thought his wife and the footage again that the Schumacher family provided was just amazing, and it really it put together a really interesting picture in terms of what Michael was like at the track and also what Michael was like away from the track. And I feel like David Coulthard also summarized that really well. So there was so much fun stuff about this, especially again in that first hour and a half. I mean, you're just fully into it, you're on the journey, and you're almost just willing Schumacher to win those championships with Ferrari. And of course, all of the things that they cover from the Benetton years, some really great commentary by Flavio Briatore, the very tough and actually in some fans' eyes controversial scenes, of course, of Ayrton's death as well. Now that was a very difficult one to cover. There's been some comments about fans about how it might be a little bit disrespectful to show the Ayrton Senna crash, but the one thing I will say is that Ayrton Senna's family, very similar to Michael Schumacher's, have all of the rights and all of the say in terms of what footage can be used and not used. And I feel like, I mean, they would have had to have got the blessing from the Senna family to actually use the footage. So if they're okay with it, I totally understand why they put it in there. Some people have thought that maybe it was a little bit too much, and I definitely understand that, but I thought the way they used it, and in terms of what Michael said afterwards, the fact that you could see a big change, and for the first time almost I've definitely never seen that from any Michael Schumacher interview in terms of, for the first time in his life, he was actually worried about dying in a Formula One car. So those really big scenes, those big highs of him winning and dominating and being just this incredible driver, and balanced out really well by that human side in terms of his family life away from the track, and also him realizing that Formula One and racing is dangerous. I mean, you almost forget that when you're watching, but yeah, stuff like the Senna incident had a massive effect on Schumacher. And again, in a way, after 94, he was the man in Formula One. Of course, the old generation had gone either through passing away or just retiring out of the sport. Michael Schumacher was now the predominant star in Formula One, and after winning all those championships with Benetton, he wanted a new challenge, and I thought that was just, again, amazingly covered in the sense that his motivation wasn't championships, it was building up something special, building up a team, and that was going to be Ferrari. Now, despite all of the highs, this film was definitely not perfect in my opinion, because I feel like the thing that really kind of brought it back for me was some of the pacing, because as I mentioned, the first hour and a half, I mean, it is a roller coaster and you're just along for the ride, and it is an absolute, just incredible experience. You're going through the highs, the lows, the controversies, the successes, and it is also just so brilliantly accompanied by the footage and the interviews, just really getting you into that era, and definitely that is the highlight of the film in my opinion. But then it gets to a really strange stage, because something that you don't realize until about an hour into the film is that we are quite, we're still very early in the Schumacher career, and we've only got about an hour left of this film, and it definitely has a few pacing issues, because from about the 1 hour 30 mark when he wins his world championship for Ferrari, which is like the big climax of the film, it only takes 7 minutes for them to get to him winning his 7th world title and announcing his retirement at Monza in 2006. 7 minutes to win 5 titles at Ferrari, which was kind of the peak of his Ferrari domination. And I feel like some of this might be a negative and some of this might be a positive. It really depends what you were looking for in this film, but this is definitely more, if I use the example of superheroes, this was definitely more of an origin story in terms of how Michael Schumacher finally became that Ferrari superstar and won their first championship for 20 years. It's not about what he became, it's about how he got there. Now, in my opinion, I thought that this was going to be a lot more in terms of, there was going to be a lot more about the domination and how he kept up those standards, how he pushed the likes of McLaren and Renault, Kimi Räikkönen and Fernando Alonso, but it was really more about how he got to Ferrari and how he got finally that first world championship. And so again, that is definitely my biggest critique. I thought the pacing, especially in the last kind of 14 minutes, it was a little bit strange. I mean, we spend all this time getting to winning a championship for Ferrari, and then in the space of less than 15 minutes, we're retiring, we're enjoying life outside of Formula One, then we're back to Mercedes, then it doesn't quite work out. They barely even talk about his time at Mercedes, and then that's it. We're kind of, that's the end of kind of the Michael Schumacher as we know his story in Formula One. So yeah, the pacing in the back end was a little bit strange, but when it did actually get to the final 10 minutes, and how could we not talk about, some incredible scenes with the likes of Seb, and more importantly, obviously Michael's family. Now, that was very hard to watch, there is no doubt about it. And again, as I mentioned right at the beginning, this was all in cooperation with the Schumacher family. Now, there's been so much stuff said online about the fact that they don't talk too much about his condition, but that didn't kind of really resonate with me, because I think there's a very good reason why they didn't talk about his condition. And even as much as they did, even in those interviews, someone from Netflix had to ask obviously his wife in terms of how is Michael doing, and the fact that they haven't said anything for years and are really keeping everything so private, I kind of understood why they didn't talk too much about it. But even the little stuff that they did, it hit so hard, especially more than anything, Mick Schumacher and some of the little details that he revealed, even in the very short scenes that he had, like he wished he could talk to his dad about the life he has now as a Formula One driver. And I think just even that little line, I feel like it tells you exactly where kind of, what Michael is like right now, and it really does hurt to hear that. So yeah, I thought all of that was handled so well by the family, because it is their right to tell us what they want us to know and what they want us not to know. So yeah, I thought it was handled very well. And the last 10 minutes, how could you not get, that lump in your throat and just almost a tear in your eye? It was really hard to hear, but that is just the sad reality. And again, we all kind of support Michael, and he is fighting, we know, every single day, but his legend still lives on. And I feel like this film did a really good job to give us kind of an overview, not in terms of his career, but the rise to become a Ferrari legend and to win that first world championship for Ferrari. So as I summarized earlier, this isn't necessarily a film about Michael's career from start to the very end in massive detail. It's all about the origin story, how he was right from a kid starting at karting, and then how he got to being a Formula One world champion and bringing Ferrari back to the very top. It would have took an absolutely almighty driver to do that, and there is no doubt that Michael Schumacher was the best of them all. And I feel like even if you're not a massive Formula One fan, there is so much to take away from this documentary, even on a personal level, even on a mental level, in terms of the dedication and the hard work and the focus that it takes if you really want to get to the very top. And Michael Schumacher, well, there was no doubt that by the time he was done, he was undoubtedly one of the greatest and arguably the greatest Formula One driver of all time. Now, in terms of my ranking, I would give this an A-. I feel like there is so much to take away from it. I feel like there is so much to enjoy. It might not be perfect. There might be some pacing issues there and there, but I feel like there is just something to enjoy for everyone. Even if you're not a Formula One fan, it's more of a human story more than anything else, and coping with the pressures of Formula One. And that is why I think it was done really nicely, if it was not perhaps the perfect summary of Schumacher's career. Anyway, that is just my thoughts, but as I said right at the beginning, now let's jump in and see your thoughts that you gave me on Twitter. I put out a tweet a couple of days ago asking people in terms of their thoughts, their positives, their negatives, and what they thought of the film in general. Now, don't forget to follow me on both Instagram and Twitter. I'll put the handle somewhere on the screen, but it's at Aldas001 on both of them. But yeah, let's jump in. So, first up, we have at Mihe Krager. Apologies if I mispronounce any of these names or Twitter handles, and he says, as a pure Michael Schumacher fan, I never truly supported anyone else. Fair enough. I would say it was great. I would have focused more on his domination years, 2001 to 2004, definitely agree with that, and at his years at Mercedes. His final retirement was also not covered, which was a shame. I would say 8.5 out of 10. So, yeah, kind of very similar to what I said. I feel like obviously it was more about the rise of Schumacher, and the funny thing is the 5 titles with Ferrari and even the 3 years with Mercedes, it was kind of just glossed over very quickly and kind of fitted into only about 10 minutes. So yeah, I definitely agree with that one. Next up, we have at Aldridge96_AFC. Solid C for me. It might be more interesting watch for new F1 fans or his hardcore fans, but I didn't really feel like I learned anything new from it. Enjoyed it nonetheless. It was well crafted, but also very safe as far as documentaries go. Definitely agree with this one, but again, I feel like the safe aspect, it all comes back to the fact that nothing in this documentary would have been shown without the approval of the Schumacher family, so that is why it is very safe. And again, I really do like the fact that he says it's probably more for newer fans and hardcore Schumacher fans, and I feel like that's a really fair thing to say, because it's not a deep dive into all of the little details of his career. It's about perhaps educating the people that weren't watching or don't even know that much about Michael Schumacher, but perhaps just know his name in terms of what really took him to the very top of Formula One. So yeah, definitely agree with that one as well. Next up, we have Prost Stan account. Love to see it. That's brilliant. He said, solid C. I was disappointed with it. I expected it to have a lot more information and insight into the more unknown aspects about him, but it was mostly surface level stuff. Probably a good step for newer F1 fans, but not for older ones. Would have worked way better as a 10-part series. I mean, yeah, that's a very good point actually. Again, very similar to what we talked about. He was disappointed with it. It wasn't as much informative and insightful as perhaps maybe he would have wanted. A lot more surface level. I like the way he's phrased that for newer F1 fans, but really interesting that he said perhaps it would have worked better as a 10-part series. Again, there's only so much that they allowed to show, and perhaps they thought that fitting it into a 2-hour movie was maybe better than a 10-part series, but looking back, perhaps maybe they could have put more time into it and kind of stretched it out in terms of giving the right level of detail for his Ferrari domination years. So maybe it would have worked better as a 10-part series. I think that is a very very interesting take, and yeah, what interesting to think about. I really do actually, I quite like that. Next up, we have, oh yes, of course, made by Perspective, Sam, who is probably the biggest Schumacher fan that I know. Amazing F1 content creator. His link, by the way, will be at the very top of the description. Definitely go and check him out. We've done a video actually in the past talking about Michael Schumacher, of course, and he is, again, one of the biggest Schumacher fans that I know, and he says, a gentle but good summary of Michael's career and the difficulties of juggling being at the very top of the most prestigious racing category in the world, and family life, which was the most important thing to Michael. The update on his condition was difficult to hear, but needed. And that's really great to hear, because again, if hardcore Schumacher fans like him are happy with it in terms of what they got and the insight that they got, then I'm happy as well. I feel like, again, a gentle but good summary. That's, I think, a really good way of phrasing it, and I feel like that's kind of what we got. And again, an update on his condition that was difficult to hear, but it was good to get at least a little bit of news about Michael, about how Michael is now, because we all are so fascinated by him, and we just want, even though it's impossible, we just want to see Michael and have any information that we can on him. So yeah, as long as Schumacher fans like him are happy, then I am happy as well. Last up, we have Elisa, who says, B+, I loved it a lot. I think it focused on the right parts, his early career, which isn't usually covered, and the personal side. As said by others, not really a lot of new info, but a good piece nonetheless. Didn't shy away too much away from the controversies. Yes, this is definitely something that I found very interesting. As I said, the fact that they didn't shy away from Michael's controversies. I mean, that's part of his legacy. That's part of why he is the driver that he is. And I feel like the whole, obviously, Adelaide 94 and Jerez 97. Jerez 97 was the really amazing one for me, the way it was covered in terms of Michael thinking that there is no way that he was wrong. There's no way that he did anything wrong. I mean, it was Jacques that crashed into me, and the amazing kind of little bits of information from Ross Brawn to when they showed Michael the replay, he was like, you know, Michael, you did crash into Jacques. So it just kind of gives you, again, just a little insight into the psyche of Michael Schumacher, the fact that he was just so utterly committed and so just 100% confident in his ability that he almost thought that he could do no wrong. So I thought the controversies, so to speak, were covered really well. Well, there you have it. That is my review for the Schumacher film/documentary out on Netflix right now. Now, let me know all of your thoughts in the comments box below. And if you did enjoy this video, then don't forget to drop a like and smash that subscribe button. And of course, I'll see you in the next one.